Hey everybody, John Soriano here. Just want to take a couple of minutes to go over something that I've been pondering for a while now. And it actually comes back from my early days in martial arts. And there was a book that I read when I was just beginning training, and it was in a Jeet Kune Do series of books. For those of you not familiar, Jeet Kune Do was Bruce Lee style. And I was actually always more fascinated with Bruce Lee's philosophy than the technique. Not saying that, excuse me, not saying that the technique was bad or anything like that, but the technique flowed from his philosophy. And this book in the series on Jeet Kune Do that I was reading was called Absorb What Is Useful. And the premise was based on one of Bruce Lee's philosophies, namely, absorb what is useful and discard what's useless, and then take what you've taken and make it your own. Okay, I'm paraphrasing some, but that's the gist of it. So you absorb what is useful, so you look at things, you take from them, excuse me, what is useful, and you make it your own. Okay, and the way you do that is to look for the principles that make something work. Okay, so whether you're looking at EFT, NLP, hypnosis, which are my three main techniques that I use with people, or any modality along those lines, the key to mastery is not the technique. Okay, that surface level structure there. Okay, in EFT and especially in, for example, the basic EFT certification course that I did with Dr. Richard Nongard, available through the ICBCH, I was very intent on having at least one of the videos specifically for the principles of EFT. And then, of course, the use of principle work kind of flowed throughout the video series. And the reason I did that is very simple. If you have the principles down, then you get to create whatever you want. And that gives you the mastery and the flexibility and gets you way beyond the technique. As Gary Craig used to say, you go from the mechanics to the art of delivery, okay? The art of it. And you only get to art by principles. So whatever you're doing, and I'm blessed in that I seem to have a natural inclination to do that with whatever I study. I need to get down to the principles of it. Whether it was martial art training way back when, and I still do some now, based on principles. And again, I could do things with principles that will enable me to create technique. And that's where you really want to be. So in EFT, I just did a video a few minutes ago about something called Google Map timeline technique for EFT. You create because you can understand the principles. Right? I created because I did by principle on what I need to do to make an EFT session effective. What principles could I use that intermingle from my other modalities of NLP and hypnosis, and bring them all together. So as you're reading, as you're studying, as you're watching, whatever way you're taking your training in for whatever those modalities are, start asking yourself, what is the principle that drives this? What is the principle that makes this effective? Okay, that requires a deeper dive into the information. But once you have the principles set in your mind and ready for you to use in your hand, then you achieve the art of whatever it is you're doing. So people always ask me, how do you get to, I mean, don't want to sound like I'm tooting my own horn here, but a lot of times people ask me, how did you get so good at X or Y when you haven't really been doing it that long? And the reason is because I go deep into the principles right off the bat, and I get to master the principles. Now, of course, you need to practice and you have time in for that. I mean, I've been doing most of the stuff that I do now for over 10 years, okay? But that's with refinement and practice and everything else. I mean, you could have in martial arts, again, to use that example, You can have the principles, but if you never stand in front of somebody, the odds are pretty high you're going to get punched in the face if you haven't practiced it before, even though you have it in your head. So you do have to practice the principles. But once you have the principles down, you can do that. So whenever I train somebody, I'm always training them to start to go towards the deep dive on the principles of how this works as soon as possible. So my advice to you, if you want to master EFT, if you want to master NLP, if you want to master hypnosis, if you want to master faster EFT, if you want to master TAT, if you want to master any of these, start to question whenever you're in front of the information, what is the principle that drives this technique? What is the principle that makes this effective? Ask those two questions. Okay, could take, for example, NLP. And you can read, in fact, I even have one. I should have brought it out for the sake of the video. There's a book I have, 350 plus techniques in neurolinguistic programming. And it looks like a phone book. It's literally about this thick, okay? With 350 plus techniques. Now, a beginner NLPer will look at that and say, okay, well, I have to start going through all the techniques because it's about the techniques. And it's not about the techniques, you see. You get to 350 plus techniques because you know how to create them through principle. And if you actually go through that book and you really take the time to read through, you'll start to see the similarity threads that go through almost all of them. And you go back to the principles of NLP that come namely from modeling excellence. So NLP in its infancy was not a technique construct, it was a principle construct. Okay, as Bandler would say, it's a bunch of principles and theories that give birth to technique. That's what it is. EFT is the same thing. I mean, if you look at it, it's a very simple process mechanically. You find something that bothers you, you rate it, you have as much specificity as possible, and you tap. Okay, Gary Craig used to say all the time, I can teach this to a 12-year-old, have him go out in the mall and have a 70% hit rate just on mechanics. But the art of it comes in the principles of how this is working and why it's working. Same thing for hypnosis, same thing for all of them. So that's my advice to you if you want to seek mastery, and to seek mastery in the shortest amount of time, dig deep into the principles of what you're doing, and you'll be able to create things and techniques from there. Until next time, take care.